So we're going to do some welcome and introductions. It's our first meeting of the year. And then we're going to do some, like I said, some updates about the network, our CALPADS network. Obviously, there have been some logistical changes with the CDE regional meetings, which are great. It makes more sense to have Brandy broadcast to everybody, but she was kind of the anchor of our meeting. So we're trying to think how we can best utilize our meeting time. Some quick assessment and accountability updates, and then we'll go into our vendor breakouts. So our team, it's just the two of us. I'm Evan Bartelheim. I'm the project director of the accountability and data literacy team, and I'm joined by Jaime. He's Jaime Oliveros. He's our data specialist here. We kind of anchor the CALPADS network. I'm a former LEA CALPADS administrator myself, and I do not envy anybody who's sitting in that chair right now, because there have been so many headaches this year, as I have heard through email. So I appreciate the fact that you guys are doing the work you do. And I was just reviewing the chat in that last meeting, and it's like, yes, I think everybody needs to take a deep breath, give yourself a pat on the back, and we'll keep plowing forward. So how about some, yeah, go ahead.
Excuse me, Evan, sorry about that. The breakout room, the persons that are not in a room already with their specific SIS, it's not giving me a list of the persons that are not in one of these groups, so that I can put them in one. I'm not sure how to do this.
Okay, well, maybe when we get to there, as long as people are renamed, when we launch the breakouts, then we'll just reassign them, and it's a pretty quick process.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So yeah, make sure if you didn't already, if you joined us a little bit late, if you can, just put if you didn't fill out the survey in advance for your SIS vendor, please just add your vendor's name to rename yourself, so we can reassign you pretty quickly. So in the chat, I know this is the downside of everything online. If you could introduce yourself in the chat by sharing your LEA's name and the number of years you've worked with CALPADS. We'll see who's the winner here with regards to the most years. Of course, Wendy, you've been around for a long time. I know, I guess we'll know who's been around since the beginning of my Carolyn. I used to work in Las Virgenes. All right, 2 years. See if we have any newbies. That's kind of what I was wondering. Do we have anybody who's brand new to CALPADS? Since 2002.
Wow.
Yeah, it's interesting. Speaking of Las Virgenes, back when I was with Las Virgenes, I remember our IT person at the time was saying, yeah, CALPADS is just getting tighter and tighter and tighter in terms of what, now we're really seeing it come home to roost, right? As they add new elements, and it's, the interface between CALPADS and TOMS and CALPADS with SACE or other special ed vendors, it's making it increasingly challenging to keep up with all the changes. Welcome, Yadira, brand new district, Eastside Union. Very happy that you're joining us today. And so also, just to kind of get a sense, and this is going to be primarily what we talk about this morning, is what do you hope? What are your hopes that the CALPADS network can do to make your job a little easier this year? So Brandy gives a lot of information. We know there's the weekly CSIS CALPADS Q&A that gives you a lot of information, but I think there's a gap there that I think only a network can really provide. But what do you think that is? Because I'm trying to get a sense, of how we can take advantage of the collective wisdom, and you see how many years we have in this group. Okay, so promising practices within your vendors. Okay. What other hopes do you have for what the CALPADS network can provide? Connect and network with other members who work in CTE. Or Mika and we just met last couple of weeks ago related to another workshop. So Wendy, Helping Network can help us keep up with the constant, ever-present changes. Absolutely. learning how districts do the same things differently. And there are some inherent challenges that I think we face because you're dealing with different vendors, so the processes are not always the same. And so the extent to which we can kind of try to find those commonalities or at least link you with people by the same vendor, that's, I think, one of the values. So let me give you some updates since we kind of started down this path already. And this is going to be brief today. I'll be honest with you. You know, we were mostly looking for your feedback during this time because we are kind of trying to figure out, you know, our previous meetings. So hold on, we've got a big surge in people here. Jaime, can you let all them in? In our prior meetings, we always had Brandy as kind of the anchor to our meetings, right? So now with Brandy delivering and the CDE regional meeting, we still have our vendors, but you know, there's kind of this potential we have. I look at it as a potential to like take better, make better use of our network time and do some things that are focused around problems specifically that come up for CALPADS administrators and CALPADS technicians, and try to build that, you know, the practice around a network of sorts that can be very helpful to one another. Among the changes we've made, and I think I may already drop that in there, is that this year we are transitioning to Canvas. So in the past, we were all our resources and documents you would have found on the LACOE website. And we're trying to clean up the LACOE website to make it a lot more simplified so you're not hunting around for everything. So all our materials are going to be hosted now in Canvas. And we haven't even really made full use of Canvas. I mean, among the things that we're hoping we can take advantage of are the discussion forums, so we could actually have some kind of posting some ongoing discussion items that we can respond to one another rather than just kind of emailing, you know, so there may be a reference section, but also just identifying any shared resources. I've seen some great resources that have come out of other county offices that I'm happy to share there that are just good tools for, you know, how to use, you know, rely on processes for getting your data as clean as possible, and sharing those types of documentation there, or anything that comes up from any of our LEA members would be great. So today we just have basically a very simple agenda posted there and a couple of resources that are linked, including we have the link to the checklist, the CALPADS checklist, which I think is a really useful tool. And we'll also post, I have recording today, we'll post the recording on that page and do follow-up. So you can always know, okay, well, where did we see that? Oh, I heard that somewhere. You always know that the recording will be posted there on Canvas too. We'll just kind of keep all our LACOE CALPADS network stuff saved in the same place. So just in terms of the purpose, and I'm open to whatever you want to add or augment to this, but here's kind of the purpose as we see it, that we're here as part of this network to share timely information on CALPADS issues. And that includes sending out information that comes up you know, through CALPADS, just forwarding it, even if it's sometimes stuff that happens on the assessment or accountability side of the CD house. If things are relevant to CALPADS professionals, we make sure to send everything out to our CALPADS network members. But we also are hoping to build an understanding of CALPADS impact and reach. I think I speak from experience that until I was kind of handed the keys to CALPADS as an LEA administrator, I didn't fully comprehend what my colleague Las Virgenes was saying to me. And now it's become clear. And I can tell you one of the key reflections of how important CALPADS data is that every month we have a CDE has a state and federal program directors meeting, and CALPADS takes a central role. Brandy always presents, and you hear people from the assessment side of the house, people from the legislative side of the house, all these others, but there's always Brandy and CALPADS people reporting out updates, and it's just because it affects so many different pieces of the way we operate. And so it really is clear, but that helping to spread and to evangelize. I know Jessica, my predecessor, used to call it, you know, speaking CALPADian. You know, I think that's it's really, to a lot of people, it's really unapproachable. And so trying to make it more approachable and understanding how CALPADS works so that there's a common understanding. And for the purposes of the people in this network, we're hoping that we can then get more people to support you. And I think you heard it, some of it in the CDE meeting, is how do you build processes where you have participation and cooperation between different people on your LEA staff, because you can't really do it alone. You can't get a comprehensive picture of your data and a clean and reliable picture of your data if you don't have that support from other people, but they need to help understand it. They need to understand it. Primary purpose is to connect the CALPADS professionals with each other to build capacity. So that's what some of you had identified within the chat, that's something you're hoping to do. And that definitely is something we have to do. I think that the people who are on this call right now and the collective wisdom can be harnessed to take on virtually any issue. Some other stuff I think is really interesting from my perspective, this collective problem solving, bringing attention to problems early. So I think there are a couple of things that have come up, that bubbled up. The issue around SSIDs and the LPAC this year, it started to bubble up earlier in the summer, but it wasn't necessarily something that I was connecting at the time because it was coming from the assessment side of the house. I wasn't connecting it to an issue with slowdown in CALPADS and SSID issues. And I think that that's something that we can leverage our collective strength as things start to come up. If you can help us by surfacing these, and then we can reach out to the CDE and we reach out to Brandy and they'll be supportive. And I think she referenced a few other things that are like that. These things surface, they're not really known problems. I think it's the kind of the unforeseeable consequences of certain things, right? And so sometimes they're little. I know Wendy and I had, or no, it was actually not Wendy, someone else and I had a little issue with the CALPADS fatal error related to the LPAC automatic assignment of the ELAS, right? And it may have happened to just her, it may have happened to multiple people, but it's something that we can then take to CALPADS so they can at least put out some communications or address it in their Q&As. When possible, if we have solutions or workarounds that we can share with one another, that's really helpful. And then finally, the best practices and procedures. I think this is the real value. And I was talking to a new colleague here, and I actually should have introduced him. I don't think he's not on this call, but we have now in our curriculum and instruction side of the house, we have a new assessment person, Stephen Bartlett, but he was the CALPADS LEA coordinator. And so I was talking to him the other day and I said, okay, well, where is that kind of the need, do you think, for the CALPADS? You were just recently, CALPADS LEA coordinator. And he pointed to that area that's kind of missing from the updates that Brandy gives or even the Q&As. And it's that process, it's that the things that you learn to do that work out for you. So as an example, he used, a couple years ago now, but the enrollment process where you could no longer on the home language survey ask the question, of where the student's, country of origin was. And that was something that was a real, it happened kind of outside of CALPADS, but it had a major impact. And I think, we got the policy as CALPADS people, but we didn't necessarily have the workaround. So it was one of those times where we could leverage the collective knowledge just to find out what other people were doing and what was working. And so those are the types of best practices that I think we would be well served to be able to share with one another. So I have a survey that I want to share with you now, and I just want to kind of, before I drop it in the chat, just kind of want to go over what I'm hoping to get from this. And you can fill it out now or you can fill it out later. But for our purposes, I'm just wondering, what are the specific areas of concern that you would like to address this year? And in relation to what I just said. So, clearly the things that were bubbling up in Brandy's meeting, special education seems like it's ongoing for everyone. But also we have issues surrounding English learners, independent study, the state assessments, accountability. And so this is probably not everybody's front of mind because we haven't had a real dashboard in a while, but we know we're moving back into there. Data governance, assignment monitoring, okay, distance learning, Sue-Ann. Yeah, so I've created this, just a brief survey it's in a Google Doc, and I've dropped that in there. And so basically I'm asking kind of on a 1 to 5 scale, if you could identify your level of interest. Maybe you think this is not really a problem for you. It's not something that you would want to address, but what I'd like to do is be able to use these, the time we have either in these meetings or in topic specific meetings, because some of these will require more time than we have. So think of it like an office hours that maybe would happen in the month off of our CalPADS quarterly meetings, that we could get together, convene around a specific topic. So you're not obligated to come to those meetings, but it would just be an opportunity to hear from other LEA CalPADS coordinators as to how they're addressing. So I'd be also looking for some expertise. I'd be reaching out to you, those of you who have a lot of experience, to find out what you're doing, and hopefully getting you to share kind of a panel of experts type approach. And I think that the challenge is going to be, like I said before, it's the how. If you know the what, and I think when we see kind of the problems that are arising that Brandy was talking about, students who are eligible for assessment, but you're having issues. Well, there's a how involved there, and there's a how as it relates to assignment monitoring, right? And so those things are getting better, but some people have kind of figured out how to make that work now already, and other people are still struggling with that. And oftentimes it may be a struggle that is out of your control, because you can't necessarily get the people to sit at the table with you who need to be there. And so, in our role here at the county, one of the advantages we have is that, we also have other networks that we can reach out to, and we can emphasize the importance. So when we talk about assignment monitoring, for instance, we know that this is something that, the HR folks and the CalPADS folks and the curriculum and instruction folks all need to sit at the table, right? And so we can help leverage that. So if we have one of these meetings, we can actually send out, reach out to a broader scope of people than just the CalPADS network. So if you could just take a moment to fill out that survey, that they'll drop it in again, just so we know. And if you don't want to get to it right now, that's fine. We will definitely send it out again, because we really want your feedback. I also added in there just a question about whether or not this meeting time works. And I think that, we'll have to see what the CDE says. Obviously, as they're closing up the meeting, they proposed having county level breakouts. So I suspect before the next meeting, there may be a change, and we may be moving this meeting onto the CDEs. You may be tagging along with them, so that would be fine too. But also a question about whether you'd be willing to come and interested in coming to these kind of one-off meetings that are topic specific, if they, of course, if they're of interest to you. So if you could fill that out, that would be great. So now I'm going to give you just some very brief assessment and accountability updates. Again, filtered for the relevance to CalPADS professionals. And that's kind of always the lens that I'm going to look through. And hopefully these all make sense to you. So just so you have this kind of broad picture, you probably already know, there are a lot of assessments that are back online. And I think that, like somebody asked the other day, one of our districts, if everything was back on this year, if there's a waiver, it's like, no waivers, everything's on, everything, and then some, right? So there's some new wrinkles. We have the alternate LPAC field test, which just opened, the window for that opened the other day. Hopefully your assessment coordinator or your LPAC coordinator has lined that all up. But those are some very, this is a new assessment. It's a field test, but everybody will be taking it. But that adds some new wrinkles for our CalPADS folks, predominantly around the identification and eligibility for that test and the timeliness of that. And because it's somewhat early this year for this is the alternate LPAC summative. There's not an alternate LPAC initial yet. So this is the summative. It's happening between November 1st and February 15th. So the implications of that are, you need to have students, classified in a way that they can have access to the test. But everything else is kind of online and would be same as usual. So of course, accommodations and other things. That's one takeaway is there was a plan this year to integrate the accommodations through CalPADS. It's not happening. It's still going to be a manual upload into TOMS that your CASP LEA coordinator will be taking on. So they pushed that till a later date. So we're still trying to work things out, but they eventually will have the ability to carry over accommodations for students with IEPs will be identified as part of the CalPADS process with special education. That's not happening this year, however, so that's still going to be something they need to address. Specifically related to the alternate assessments, so it's important, I think, for everybody just to understand that, as I mentioned, Alt LPAC window is open. And just to be able to assign alternate assessments in TOMS, there's a couple of things that have to be in place. So eligible students must have the following. They have to have that education program code in the field 3.13 set to special education, a primary disability category that can't be blank, and an enrollment code of either 10 or 30. And then this is the big one. It's been emphasized a lot, so you probably have already heard of it. But if a student is identified for an alternate assessment and take that alternate assessment, they will be then, they're going to be categorized for all alternate assessments. So if a student is identified to take the alt LPAC this fall, the expectation is that student is automatically registered to take all of the California alternate assessments if they're at an eligible grade level. So if a student is in grades 3 through 8 or 11, they would automatically be assigned to the alternate assessments if they were if they took the alt LPAC, or if they get to the spring, if they take Cal Alt in math, they'll take Cal Alt in science, Cal Alt in English, etc. See your question, Claudia. Yes, the presentation file is loaded into our LACOE canvas. It's actually linked on the agenda page. So that's it for assessment right now. There's lots to come, but maybe we'll hold off on that for a more specific meeting. But just the federal and state accountability, I think I've heard a few districts that I've talked to recently, they kind of said, well, we're kind of easing back into accountability. We had a couple of years without anything. So it's been kind of hard to get people back into the mindset, but it never really went away. It just kind of got pushed into a different direction temporarily, and we'll see that this fall. So there was a federal waiver from last spring. That federal waiver removed the requirement to publish the state level indicators for the California School Dashboard. However, the Assembly Bill 130 that came out during the summer did require that we report valid and reliable data, and as well as local indicator data. And so just could briefly go over this. And most of this stuff has already been reported by you. There's not much you can do now to change, but I just think it's important to kind of review it and then think about next year, because next year, if your processes aren't in place, the data, you can look at this year's data that will be eventually reported in late fall. And by that, I think we could say we should be getting a preview of this data in the end of this month. It's already November, and probably publicly released in December. And the reason it's coming out so much later this year is because of that extension for assessment for the LPAC and the CASP into July. So that slowed everything down. So any LEAs that reported, any LEAs that did administer the CASP, if they found that it was viable, they will be publishing that on the CASP LPAC dashboard. It's not dashboard, it's the reporting page. And if you didn't, then your local assessment will be reported out through the SARC this year. So that will be reported out in no later than February. But yeah, if you did administer any of the CASP tests, those will appear on dashboard. But then you also have this additional data reports on DataQuest or other supporting areas. And we can expect to see those, as I said, as early as November for some of the pre-reviews for the accountability coordinators, and then public release in December. So what will be on this modified dashboard? Here's what we know so far: enrollment data. That's kind of a straightforward one. English learner reclassification, our chronic absenteeism rates. And this is for the 2020-21 school year, just to be clear. So what's coming out will be 2020-21. Expulsion rates, then our grad rates, including our combined 4- and 5-year grad rates and our 1-year DAS graduation rates. One of the areas that I've been working on a lot lately, just because of a workshop, is that college and career measures report. This will be somewhat modified this year. And this, a lot of the component parts of the college and career indicator are included as required metrics for the LCAP. So people are very interested in this data. And I will say this, as we got into the 2020 report, there are a number of new career measures that were really kind of, we knew that they were looking at other measures, but I think when it came out, it kind of flew under the radar that suddenly we had all these career measures being reported, and virtually none of the LEAs in LA County had anything reported in that area. So I think it's an area of growth, or just building some awareness, that I'd like to propose doing this year, that we could talk about what are these measures and how do we report them. And because I know these things are happening out there. But so this next year, we won't be able to report the 2021 college and career measures report as we have for the last 3 years. It's a separate data file. It was a little bit of a fluke last year that the 2020 graduating cohort had taken the SBAC in 11th grade. So they actually had all the pieces they needed to generate that report. However, the 2021 cohort, we had no state assessment in 2020 for them when they were 11th graders. So that piece of the college and career indicator puzzle won't be reportable. So what the reporting components purportedly will be, and we'll see when they finally get out there, but the AP exam completions, IB exams, completion of at least one CTE pathway, completion of A through G. A piece that is actually a required metric in the LCAP, completion of A through G and CTE pathway together. So that's kind of a unique one that a lot of people were kind of flummoxed by this year when we're filling out the LCAPs. Completion of a college credit course, another area I think we have a lot of opportunity for growth in terms of our reporting. The state seal by literacy. And I don't know if any of the new career measures, which include like pre-apprenticeships, work-based learning that's specific for students by IEPs. I'm not sure if those will be reported or not. So we'll wait to see on that, but they were in that college and career indicator measure last year. Let's see. So also local indicators, this was kind of a mess this year. I know this isn't necessarily data that any of our CALPADS folks would have reported, but this year was still required that the LEAs actually collect the local indicators and report and share the results in conjunction with the approval of the LCAP. So that would have been back in June. And then there was an expected upload to the dashboard. And there was obviously a lot of murkiness around this because a lot of LEAs didn't get that reported. We did some outreach on behalf of the CDE in the last week or so to try to get folks to upload, but I'm sure a lot of folks missed that. I haven't heard back from the CDE if they'll have another opportunity, but the responses were due by October 15th. They did extend the window for, I know several of our LEAs were able to get their local indicators reported. But if you hadn't get your local indicators reported, they probably will just not appear on this modified dashboard. There was no, because of the waiver, there were no repercussions this year. There was no met, not met. It doesn't have any bearing on being identified for technical assistance or anything. So it just was a matter of one of the expectations was that they would be reported, but no repercussions if they didn't get in. So it was a little bit of a mess this year, but just wanted to make you aware of that. So moving forward, though, this is kind of, I think, where our heads will need to go. I know you got a lot in front of you right now, but so in 2022, so fast forward a year from now, the state indicators will start to appear again. This is like the classic dashboard, right? They would ordinarily be colors, but they won't be colors next year because we only have status. And for the dashboard to work the way it does, you need status and a year of change. So next year, they'll only be reporting on status. Local indicators will be submitted again. They are looking at new college and career indicator measures. So as those become available, I'll definitely look to get this information out because I think it was not, even though I think everybody was aware there were these other measures that were being, reported, nobody really knew what they were. And so I know that, we have a lot of students in workability, for example, and there's potential there to get a lot of students identified, students who are on certificate of completion path who were completing a workability program that didn't get reported. So anything like that, I'll make sure we get out to you in a timely fashion before end of year next year. There will be an identification of schools and LEAs for support, so technical assistance, differentiated assistance, and comprehensive support and improvement, the federal requirement. And there will be a level 3 identification for LEAs that were identified for differentiated assistance for multiple years. So any new metrics will need to be approved. That's you'll hear about that as they go to the state board. Then in 2023, so farther even down the road, then we'll have a status and change. So we'll get back to some colors on the dashboard, local indicators submitted. Again, the support for the 2021, 22 and 22, 23 data that will go into effect. So we'll have new identification. The identification in 2022 will be a different means of identification, but 2022 and 23 will be getting back more towards that. If your colors, didn't match up, you had, a student group with 2 reds, for example, then, you could be identified for differentiated assistance. And then that year 3, again, what that would require. And here's a little timeline that our friends at Fresno County put together, just to kind of put it all together. So I saw a couple questions there, Jaime. I don't know if you want to read those to me. Sorry.
So Suan said, I'm interested in when the CD will start to require staff discipline to meet the new CRDC requirements.
Suan, I will inquire about that. It's interesting. Yeah. So when things line up with the federal requirements, and I think that we see this, and I'll kind of put it out there. You will see a data file being released by the CDE this year that'll be kind of probably somewhat startling, I think, in a lot of cases. It's the teacher misassignment data, and I know this isn't necessarily a CalPADS piece, but since you do work in assignment monitoring, a lot of LEAs have been, self-reporting in the LCAP or in the SARC about their teacher misassignments based on probably not 100% clear understanding of the federal definitions of teacher misassignment. And because the LCAP and the dashboard are all pieces of the state's federal reporting and accountability system, they use the federal definitions. So there will be a data file release, probably not until March, but that will show LEA by LEA the teacher misassignments based on CalSAS, and it'll be 1920 data. That's how long it's taken to kind of clean it up. That'll show the misassignments for that year. And I think it's going to be a lot more than were self-reported in that year. And I think the same thing will probably hold true for the 2020-21 data that eventually gets reported, just because we're building awareness right now. So I think the same thing, so it might be interesting to find out when they'll apply the same federal definitions to discipline, or if they will. And I will inquire about that, and I will make sure to get that out to the network. Jaime, are there any other questions in there?
No other question of it.
Okay. All right. Well, that being the case, I think we are ready to go into our vendor breakout.